Bismillah wa salatu wa salam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam amma ba'd. So today we're going to talk a little bit more in detail about wiping over the socks, because we talked about the hadith, or one of the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You should be writing. You should be writing. Where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was traveling, and one of the companions wanted to take his socks off, and he said, leave them, and he said, and he wiped over them. Okay? So now we're going to talk about a little bit more in detail about wiping over the socks. And the scholars of Ahl Sunnah, the scholars of Islam, they have a consensus that wiping over the socks is okay, it's permissible. And that's because there's at least 40 hadith or more that are collected, at least 40 hadith, as Imam Ahmed mentioned, one of the great scholars of the past. He mentioned that there was over 40 hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He came across over 40 hadith which mentioned wiping over the socks. So this lets us know that that is from the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that it's a permissible practice for us to do. And some of the important things we want to mention, first and foremost, is the conditions for wiping over our socks. Meaning, when is it permissible, or what things need to be in place before we wipe over our socks? The first thing is that when we wipe over the socks, or to be able to wipe over the socks, is you have to be on tahara. You have to have wudu. You have to have had wudu or made ghusl, and then you put your socks on. Okay? So you have to have put your socks on when you had purity, when you had wudu, when you were in tahara. Okay? So, that is the first condition. Meaning that, for example, let's just think of an example. So if someone, they made wudu right now and they washed their feet. They washed all their body parts for wudu, all the parts that we have to wash, our face, our hands to the elbows, and wiped the head and washed the feet. So if someone did that, and then they would be able to, after that, they could wear their socks. That means that now that they're wearing their socks, if they broke their wudu, they would be able to then wipe over their socks when they make wudu again. When they make wudu the second time after breaking their wudu, they can perform the wudu like you regularly do, and then instead of washing the feet, you can wipe over your socks. Okay? The second condition, the second that we have to do is that the area that you're wiping, or I should say that your socks or whatever you're wiping over, they must cover the areas that you clean for wudu. So that means if you have those ankle socks, those socks that are way below the ankle, that just cover part of your feet, you cannot wipe over those, because the socks should cover your ankles. They should cover all the area that you normally would clean for wudu. So that is a condition before wiping over the socks, is that it covers the area you make wudu with. And that's why some scholars, they say even if you have big holes in your sock, for example, they say you can't wipe over them. But the most correct opinion is that you can still wipe over them even if you have holes in your socks. Why? Because the Sahaba, some of them were very poor, radiallahu anhum. And they, at the same time, they also, some of them were very poor, and they also had holes in their khuffain, in their khufs. Okay, some of them in the thing that covered their socks, the leather socks or whatever is covering their feet. Okay, that's what we're talking about. Okay, so those are two conditions, is that Number one, that you wore your socks in you had tahara, you were pure for salat. And the second one is that the socks cover all your area that you normally make wudu with. Okay, so that way when you wipe over your sock, you are the sock it has to cover the area that you normally make wudu with when it comes to cleaning your feet. Just a minute. The third thing is that the socks or whatever you're wiping over, that they were not gained illegally, meaning that you didn't steal the socks. Okay, the socks were permissible to use, so you didn't steal them. You didn't take them without someone's permission, and that they were, if it was a man's socks, that they are not made out of silk, because men cannot wear silk in Islam. We cannot wear silk. So have a seat. So that the socks cannot be made out of silk. Okay, good, and that they have to be gained lawfully, so they can't be stolen socks or something like this, okay, or stolen khuffain. The fourth condition, return his pencil. The fourth thing is that the socks or the khuffain, they must be pure themselves. They must be out of something that was give him his pencil back.
This is me. I forgot you were doing here.
So the socks, listen up, Sultan. The socks themselves must be made out of something that is tahur. Meaning you cannot have socks or those leather socks, the khuffain or anything that you're wearing on your feet. It cannot be from something haram. It cannot be from, for example, from pork skin, from a pig skin, or the scholars, they mention like the skin of a donkey skin. Okay, they cannot be made from something which is not exactly. Himar means donkey, so they cannot be made from something impure. Okay, something that we cannot use. Okay, so keep silent, please. Jazakallah khairan. And the last thing, the last condition is that when you're wiping over the socks, Fadli, when you're wiping over the socks, and you should keep writing your homework down, the last condition, Nasra, that when we're wiping over our socks, that if you're someone who is in a place where you reside, that you normally live in, Nasra, please listen, that if you're not a traveler, that you can wipe over your socks for a day and an evening. You can wipe over your socks for the day, for one day and an evening. So meaning like 24 hours. Okay? That means from the time, not from the time you put your socks on, but from the time you did your first wiping over the socks. That means 24 hours from that time, you can still wipe over your socks. That's if you're not a traveler. Okay? If you are a traveler, you can wipe over your socks for 3 days and 3 nights. You have 3 days and 3 nights. And there was a hadith, or one of the companions related, that the Prophet ﷺ, that someone had asked the Prophet ﷺ, or he just mentioned that the Prophet ﷺ said, during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, we used to wipe our socks for 1 day and an evening for the person who is not traveling, and 3 days and the evenings for the one who is traveling. So that shows us that is a practice that is permissible and allowable in Islam. So those are some of the conditions for wiping over, or those are the conditions for wiping over your socks in Islam. And I just want to say or emphasize the importance that when we wipe over our socks, that the time begins not when we put on our socks and then 24 hours from the time you put on your socks. No, the time begins. For example, if right now you washed your feet, you made wudu and you washed your feet, and then you put your socks on, okay, then you broke your wudu after 2 hours from now, okay, and you had your socks on, then you can make wudu and wipe your socks, and from that time, because that's the first time you wiped over your socks, you have 24 hours from the first time you wiped, not from 24 hours from when you put your socks on. Do you understand? Sort of. Anyway, so that is something I just wanted to emphasize, that the time starts when you begin to, the first time you wipe your socks. Another issue I want to mention is that when we wipe your socks, if you go beyond the time, say if you're a person who's not a traveler, if you're not a traveler, how long can you wipe over your socks?
24 hours.
Okay, 24 hours, good, excellent. So if you're not a traveler, you have 24 hours, a day and an evening. If you go beyond that time, you go beyond 24 hours and you're still in wudu during the time, doesn't mean you had wudu for 24 hours, but I'm saying if you're in wudu and it's been over 24 hours since you started wiping over your socks, that does not break your wudu. That does not break your wudu. It means you cannot wipe over your socks again. Okay, because you've went over 24 hours. So that means when you break your wudu, after that, then you have to take your socks off and make a fresh wudu and wipe over your feet, or clean your feet, wash your feet. Okay, and then you can put your socks on again, and from that time, from the time that you begin your first wiping after that, is when you have your 24 hours begins. And again, if you're a traveler, you have 3 days and 3 nights. Everybody kind of understands?
Why travel?
Because the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that in the hadith, that the traveler has 3 days and 3 nights. Also, you see, because for a traveler, a lot of times, it's much more difficult to, that is a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is making something permissible during a difficult time, because a traveler usually has different. For one, they're packing their bags, so maybe they don't have a lot of clothing, for one. Okay? 2, that it's difficult to always, maybe if you're traveling in places that are cold, and so keeping your feet covered can be, better for your health and more beneficial, and it's less difficulty. So this is something that's made easier upon you by wiping over the feet. That's why the traveler has more time. But first and foremost, and most importantly, is because the Prophet ﷺ said that we have that time. So those are just some of the wisdoms behind that. Some of the wisdoms that we know is because for the traveler has much more difficulty. And maybe they have less clothing if they're traveling. It's not like you're at home where you can use, you have your whole wardrobe that you can use. So I'll end there, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us with beneficial knowledge. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad.